Shalom, Akim. Shalom, shalom. Call halal Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shah, Bahashim Kokodash. Double honors once again, deposits the great millstone. The top of his truth. This is Naaman. Wow. This video I'm going to do here, again, further proof that all this information that's coming out on the cruelties and the horrors committed against our people. More shit is coming out, all right? And I can honestly say that personally for me, some of the wicked shit that I've heard committed against my people, just when you think you've just about heard it all, new shit comes to the surface. And this video is from List First Entertainment. It says top 10 horrible punishments for slaves in America. It says slavery, one of America's greatest tragedies, caused immeasurable suffering and loss of human life. The Stanford prison experiment, and I'm gonna get that because a lot of people aren't aware of that. This is an experiment they did in the early 1970s. And I knew this when I went back to school, I found this out. It's an example of what people, well, you know what, I'll let them do it. Let's see, there it is. The Stanford prison experiment. The Stanford prison experiment was a social psychology experiment that attempted to investigate the psychological effects of perceived power, focusing on the struggle between prisoners and prison officers. It was conducted at Stanford University on the days of August 14th through the 20th, 1971, by a research group led by psychology professor Philip Zimbardo using college students. And this goes into what happens when you put the average, let's just say Joe, and what I'm about to say describes a lot of police officers, specifically Edomites. All right, then you begin to understand how pieces of shit, when they get a little power, how they become tyrannical, more or less, all right? And this is what this experiment exposed. And a lot of police departments, as a result, they said, well, we're going to start requiring that our officers be educated. They have a college degree. And like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? You know, they just become smarter and in their wickedness, all right? Stanford prison experiment, all right, scrolling down, it says Stanford prison experiment was a social psychology experiment that attempted to investigate the psychological effects of perceived power, focusing on the struggle between prisoners and prison officers. All right, it was conducted for 1 week, and it only took that long for them, they had to shut it down. It says, in the study, volunteers were assigned to be either guards or prisoners by the flip of a coin in a mock prison, with Zimbardo himself serving as the superintendent. Several prisoners left mid-experiment, and the whole experiment was abandoned after 6 days. Early reports on experimental results claim that students quickly embraced their assigned roles, with some guards enforcing authoritarian measures and ultimately subjecting some prisoners to psychological torture, while many prisoners passively accepted psychological abuse and, by the officer's request, actively harassed other prisoners who tried to stop it. The experiment has been described in many introductory social psychology textbooks, although some have chosen to exclude it because its methodology is sometimes questioned. All right, the U.S. Office of Naval Research funded the experiment as an investigation into the causes of difficulties between guards and prisoners in the United States Navy and Marine Corps. Certain portions of it were filmed and excerpts of footage are publicly available. I saw a long time ago. It's probably still up. You can probably, I'm sure, you can find it on YouTube. It's worth a watch. It says some of the experiment's findings have been called into question, and the experiment has been criticized for unscientific methodology and possible fraud. Whereas the experiment purported to show that prison guards instinctively embrace sadistic and authoritarian personalities. That's why I've often said that so much focus is on the police officers out here patrolling the streets, and it's true that they have a lot of power. They can be judge, jury, and executioner. But you got to consider this. Behind the walls, these COs, and because of the stigma associated around prisoners, you've got the added layer or something else to deal with, more or less, as if the public, because of the prisoner, quote unquote, they don't give a damn because of that stigma. Nobody cares. So, hey, we can do what we want, all right? Nobody's going to give a fuck. And when you think about that, you think about these police officers out here in public, got body cams. They shoot a person 30 times, they still get off. How much more does a prisoner have to deal with being behind the walls where nobody can see? See where I'm going with this? Wow. Wow. So just to let you know what the experiment was, let's go back to this, all right? It says humans with power. It says, but we don't have to look any further than our own history for these examples. Slaves could be punished for any number of offenses, including theft, laziness, running away, or even speaking their native language. By some accounts, enslaved people were even disciplined for sport. Here are 10 of the most horrible punishments recorded for slaves in history, in America. It says, warning, this content contains graphic descriptions of various physical abuses and tortures, all right? Whipping, we know of that one. This is a famous picture right here. The famous image of the slave Gordon, a.k.a. Whipped Peter, reveals that the skin on his back was raised with a lattice of scars from brutal and repeated whippings, because you got to remember, who was going to, stitches, that wasn't a priority for Jake. Look at that, that's just scar upon scars, like a road map. Wow. It says, however, some owners did not stop there. When their slaves' wounds began to heal, these owners ordered that the wounds be slit open and that products such as red pepper and turpentine be applied to the gashes. These sick son of a bitches, man. According to some accounts, one owner ground a brick into rubble and dust, mixed it with lard, and had it rubbed into the wounds of a slave. Mutilation. We always say these motherfuckers got a lot to answer for. Mutilation. Slaves are often expected to work in exceptionally difficult physical conditions, especially in the fields or on cotton plantations. Other slaves worked in their masters' homes and were expected to be well groomed and clean. These slaves often had lighter skin or better speaking skills. Either way, it would make sense for slaves' bodies to be protected and maintained. However, this rarely happened, particularly in cases where slaves had fought each other or resisted their owners or overseers. It was common for owners to order bodily mutilation. Sometimes it involved cutting off an ear or slicing at the flesh. More severe examples included amputating limbs, gouging out eyes, cutting hamstrings, or even castrating both males and females. In many cases, the victims did not receive medical treatment. Some died from infection, blood loss, or other complications. Then we had branding. Branding refers to searing the flesh with a heated metal instrument. This type of torture was typically done to denote ownership, just like you do your cattle. Large companies often branded their slaves to make them easily identifiable and to prevent the theft and resale of slaves. It says in Louisiana, a code noir permitted the branding of slaves as punishment for running away. In 1840, New Orleans had developed the largest slave market in America, which placed innumerable people under this decree. All right. Often a letter or other identifiable mark was seared into the slave's face. All right. It says smoked alive. Wow. Eventually, various slave states passed laws regarding the maintenance, well-being, and rights of slaves. All right. Theoretically, this should have given slaves some protection from cruelty and abuse. In reality, these laws were rarely enforced. Some accounts describe how different methods of punishment and abuse became more popular in different states. Escaped slave William W. Brown discussed a common practice used in Virginia. He described an owner who had his slave bound and whipped in the smokehouse. Then he created a fire from tobacco stems to suffocate and smoke the slaves as further punishment. The hog's head. Former slaves may offer most harrowing accounts of slave abuse and torture. Moses Roper was born of his African and Native American mother, who was a slave to his English father. After Moses escaped his bondage, he wrote a book about his life. He explicitly outlined various tortures and indignities that slaves in America had to suffer. Moses recounted the sport and pleasure that some owners took in corporal punishment. He described a slaveholder who hammered nails into a hog's head, large barrel, and left the nail points protruding inside. His slaves were stuffed into these barrels and rolled down long, steep hills while the owner and other slaves watched. Suspended beneath a cooking fire. Harriet Jacobs also escaped slavery and wrote about her exploits. She described falling into the possession of a slave owner who sexually harassed her on a regular basis despite the protests of his wife. To avoid him, Harriet hid in the crawl space in her grandmother's ceiling for 7 years before fleeing to England. In another harrowing account, Harriet told of a slaveholder who lived close to her. He had hundreds of slaves. His favorite punishment was to tie up a slave, suspend him above the ground, and start a fire above him. A fatty piece of pork was cooked by the fire. Then the burning fat dripped onto the bare skin of the slave. Demotion or sale, that speaks for itself. Public burnings. All right, punishments were often made public. Other slaves were forced to watch as a warning that they should behave or be disciplined the same way. Hence, we know of buck breaking. All right. One horrific method of punishment was public burning. Slaves were either tied to a stake or above a fire. Some slaves fainted or passed out from smoke inhalation before the fire began to consume their bodies, but many were tortured by the flames before they finally died. Long-term chaining. All right, skipping on down. Forced reproduction. Slaves frequently endured severe sexual harassment and assaults, including rape. Women who became pregnant as a result of this abuse rarely received any medical care or special treatment. On the contrary, they were often handled more harshly by their masters' wives. Effectively pimped out by their owners, male slaves were also abused and forced to sleep with various women. Following the U.S. Act prohibiting importation of slaves, which became effective in 1808, a shortage of slaves occurred in the South. The internal slave markets boomed, which increased the demand for black people. As a result, slaves were often bought and sold based on their childbearing capabilities. They were forced to have sex with other slaves to produce more children. All right? Let's see some of the comments. Like I say, you always have one. I'm just going to start at the top. Juanis Watts says, I feel bad for so-called black people. They suffered all this for doing nothing to the whites, all right? Let's see what some of the replies said. That's truth, says you're so right. Just reading this evil racist comments proves that you're right to a much degree. I don't understand how these people feel so good about hate and torture that they inflict. And this other idiot down here talking about African kings, he said, not understanding that Africans didn't sell Africans, Hamites sold Israelites. All right, let's see, it's going on down. User 9662 says, it's easy to say get over it, or that was a long time ago. Sorry, but that's not what the Most High says. Revelation 13:10. Then read Isaiah 14:2. So-called white people and every other nation that had Israel in captivity will go into captivity. Just remember how insensitive you're being, and when y'all go into captivity, we'll see. Oh, call halal Yahweh Shah, all right? Let's not forget just you, 4367. Let's not forget the slave babies they used for alligator bait and the buck breaking, where owners would sexually assault black men in front of other slaves. My pullout game is weak says they left out the part where they separated families as punishment. Yep. Or snatching a newborn baby from their mother's womb and throwing it down onto the concrete until their head split wide open. Yeah. There you go. All right, so once again, top 10 horrible punishments for slaves in America from List First Entertainment. Like I say, just when you thought you heard just about everything, wow. Speaks for itself, all right? Like I said, these wicked pieces of shit got a lot to pay for, and they will pay, all right? They will pay. All right, like I said, they're going to receive double. All right, so I hope whoever sees this is edified. Once again, call halal Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Rakakwadash. All right. Once again, double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who told me the truth. All right. Salutations to the Akim out there on the highways and byways, pushing the truth with all honesty and sincerity while trying to wake up the hopeful elect. All right. So with that, Shalom Akim. Abba.